My name is Claire Schaefer-Duffy. I am Program Director of the Center for Nonviolent Solutions, the host organization for this afternoon's program. Located in Worcester, Massachusetts, the center is a small nonprofit with a mission to build a culture of peace in our city and beyond. We do peace advocacy as well as peace education. The latter effort includes public events like this one that we're hosting today that uphold examples of nonviolence in action. If you want to know more about our work, you can visit our website or Facebook page. Just type Center for Nonviolent Solutions in your search. I will be your moderator this afternoon, along with Abby Yanow, a board member of Massachusetts Peace Action, a statewide peace organization here in Massachusetts. I should mention that they are working extremely hard to end the war in Gaza. Nicole Bellinger, an educator and former media woman, is working tech for us today. All three of you wish you a warm welcome, especially to our panelists and participants from Israel, where it is not afternoon, but 9 o'clock at night. So we thank you for graciously sharing your time with us here before you begin your day of work tomorrow. So thank you. Before we start, I want to give a few words about the format of our program and a couple of housekeeping details. This is a program in two parts. Part one will consist of presentations from our three panelists. I will introduce each speaker, actually Abby or I, prior to her presentation. Your mics will remain muted for the duration of this section, although you're welcome to type your name in the chat box and let us know where you're from. Part two will be a Q&A with our generous panelists. Abby is going to start off with a short exercise, just a question for all of us. This is the chat box idea, Abby. And I will then provide framing for our conversation. To ask a question during the Q&A, please use the hand icon to raise your hand, and we'll do our best to check the screens, and Nicole will unmute you and let me know, or Abby and I know the name, and then you're welcome to ask your question. Because this forum was rather hastily assembled, our advertising information remained generic and didn't include the specific names of our speakers and the organizations they represented. You'll certainly hear that today, and also with the recording of this event, which will give links to their work. Our intention is to develop connections between peace efforts in the US and Israel. So we'll be diligent about getting this information to you. And without much further ado, I will ask Abby to introduce our first speaker, Nurit.
Yes, and Claire, do you want us to spotlight the speaker?
If Nicole has that capacity.
Well, we have the capacity, yeah. So Nurit.
Okay, or if you know how to, I am not a Zoom queen, so if you are, please do. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce Nurit. Nurit Brenner is a mother, professor, and activist who was raised in Israel and has been living in both the US and Israel for the last 20 years. Her eldest son is currently a combat medic in the Israel Defense Forces, and she is motivated to work towards a peaceful Middle East for the sake of all the children and young people on any side of this violent conflict that is not of their making. So welcome, Nurit.
Toda rabba. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And if you don't mind, I will add a few words about myself, but I'd like to talk about the Mother's Cry group, which is the group that I'm a part of. And I'm going to do this by sharing my screen. Okay, so can everybody see me? See my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So yes, I am part of the Mother's Cry and Za'akat Ha'imahot, as we call ourselves in Hebrew. We move down here. Okay, so I'll introduce myself and then I'll talk a little bit about the group. So I go back and forth between, and just tell me, can you see the screen with my face on it right now? Is that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just making sure that all the technology works. So I go back and forth between Nahariya in the north of Israel and Cleveland, Ohio, here in the US. And I actually have two homes. And my heart is always split between these two places. Right now, my 20-year-old son is doing his mandatory service to his country in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. He's in a search and rescue unit, which is a combat unit. He was in Gaza for a few weeks earlier in the war, and he was then reassigned to do a combat medics course for his unit, which he just recently completed and has returned to his battalion. And the entire few weeks he was in Gaza, as you can imagine, and as so many of the other mothers who are here and who are connected to our group, I don't think a single one of us has had a solid night's sleep since our children are in this terrible combat and conflict throughout Israel, whether Jewish, Muslim. My son actually has 4 Muslim soldiers in his battalion. He told me that. And Christian soldiers too, some from Ukraine and Russia, and some are Arab Christians. There's Druze soldiers, Circassian soldiers, Bedouin. We are all of us parents are losing sleep. We pray for our children. And those of us who have the capacity to lift our eyes from the horrors and maintain compassion in our hearts, we also pray for the children on any side of the conflict, on the other side of the conflict. Unfortunately, not everyone can do this yet, but I do have hope that we all will one day. Just a couple of other words about me. I run a program which I call Sacred Earth Judaism, which is a program about ecology and Judaism. So it's a kind of eco-theology program. And I also have many years experience in Arab-Jewish dialogue. That was my background, and my dissertation is on that topic. So the Mother's Cry group, which I represent here today, the group was established pretty much on October 13th. That was the day of the ground invasion after the terrible events of October 7th. And our first thought as mothers was to protect our sons and daughters who are soldiers. It has a little bit evolved since then, and this is part of our platform. We oppose this war. We oppose this conflict. Our opposition stems from several sources. One, there's just no clear or realistic objectives to the war. So quite simply, it seems futile, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. The Prime Minister of Israel likes to talk about absolute or complete victory, but as many of us have discovered, this is a slogan empty of meaning and puerile in its expression. Our children, our sons and daughters, are paying the price for these empty words, and some of them are paying with their lives. And these photos that you're seeing are from some of the protests and demonstrations that we've been a part of. These are some of the moms from the group. I was not there at these protests because I am in the US right now, although I will be in Israel again, and joining the other mothers and my sisters in action over the Passover holiday next month. So as many of you probably know, the toll has been tremendous. Over 250 soldiers. These are young men and women, right? They had their whole lives ahead of them, and they've been killed since October 2023. Of course, 1,200 Israelis were massacred on October 7th. I'm sure many of you already know this. Over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, which is almost unbearable, unfathomable. Over 150,000 Israelis have been evacuated, are living in temporary homes, and of course, countless Palestinians have been displaced in this horrible war. And children on both sides of the conflict have been orphaned, have lost limbs, have lost homes. And we cry out, enough. That is what we are saying. This is enough of this. And that is what we feel is our responsibility as mothers to make this cry, to take this cry. And we know that this is futility. By the way, this photo, I hope you can see it, is symbolically, we brought flour because we do believe that only peace will bring security and that we must stop the cycle of violence. And the flower is to represent the humanitarian disaster that is happening in Palestine. We know that this war is futile because the Hamas terror organization has not been wiped out and will not be wiped out by these actions. The military objectives have not been accomplished. They haven't even been defined. This hasn't helped Israel or Palestine. This is really a war of vengeance. And vengeance, as we all know, is, what do they say when you go take revenge? You should dig two graves, one for yourself and one for the other. So I want to tell you a little bit about our activity as a group. We join demonstrations. We give talks like this one. We are organizing and creating a platform, getting the word out, recruiting new like-minded members. Our overarching goal is to change the discourse, create a cultural shift. We know that this is not an overnight process. Every Saturday night, we're out in the streets along with many other Israelis. I don't know if you all are following the news, but people are protesting pretty much every week, and for different causes. Some are demanding that Netanyahu resign. Some are demanding a return of the hostages. Some are demanding an end to the occupation. We agree, and we want all of that too, but we add that an end to the war and an end to the endless wars. We are crying out for an end to war, a withdrawal of all soldiers and hostages from Gaza, and a political agreement that creates the possibility of peace, coexistence, and a shared life for all who dwell in the land of Israel. We want women, and particularly mothers, to have a place at that negotiating table to make sure that all our children are cared for. We need peace from the river to the sea. Some of you may already know this, The Children's Fire by Mac McCartney. It's a story, a symbol, it's a fragment of ancient wisdom. It's a longing and a way of thinking. So the story is that in ancient times, elders of a tribe would sit together in council, and they would ask the important question of how shall we govern our people? And they thought that they know that there are short and long-term consequences to governing. I wish that our leaders were as wise as these elders of the tribe. It was understood that actions which yield short-term benefits may not always serve the tribe's best interests over a long term. So they understood that children were their most important investment. We all know this. It's all intuitively, we know this, the tribe's future. This naturally led them to understand the necessity of ensuring that their leaders always sought to secure a safe and prosperous future by treating every major decision against the future well-being of our children. In the indigenous culture from which the Children's Fire emerged, everything was an expression of the invisible spiritual life force flowing within it. And they would remind, the chiefs would remind themselves and each other of the first law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this council of chiefs that will harm the children. And this is my prayer. I mean, this is what I think we need to see. I'd like to see this wisdom replicated in the Middle East. If we could hold this principle central in our minds and in all our decision-making, I believe we could resolve the Middle East conflict, despite all its complexity. So my prayer is that the principle of the Children's Fire become the prevailing one in the Middle East and throughout the world. And I believe that the way to do this is to highlight the rise of the feminine, and that's where we are today. And this mothers group that we are part of is, and I think all of us, I mean, I think we are mostly women on this call, and this is what we are seeing today. We are seeing more women rising up, saying enough, calling out the leadership that has been so short-sighted for so long. It is time for us to rise up for the maternal, to have a voice at the table, and to determine the future for our children. And that is really my message right now. I just want to add a few words by Palestinian poet Mohammad Darwish, who speaks so poignantly and so movingly. And he says, "The wars will end and the leaders will shake hands, and that old woman will remain waiting for her martyred son. And that girl will wait for her beloved husband. And the children will wait for their heroic father. I do not know who sold the homeland, but I know who paid the price." Thank you.
Thank you, Nurit. That was really beautiful. Thank you. Our second speaker, I'm a little overflowing from what you just said, so I hope I can stay without tears. Our second speaker is Hamital Guri, and she is, one moment, and I will find my paper. I was executive, she is a founding director of Consult for Good, a cultural critic, lecturer, consultant, and storyteller for personal organizations and social transformation. She served as executive director of the Daphna Fund, Israel's first and only feminist fund. She continues to serve as a consultant to foundations, as an expert on funding with a gender lens. Her areas of expertise include organizational, program, resource, and leadership development, gender audits and mainstreaming, diversity, inclusion, and intersectional approach to social transformation. She teaches in the MA track in nonprofit management at the Rothberg International School at the Hebrew University. A passionate storyteller and performer, she develops training models and modules and materials on storytelling, writes a blog in Hebrew and English. She's also a facilitator and trainer and holds a diploma in group facilitation from the Meged Institute at Hebrew University and in team facilitation and management from the Martin Buber Institute at Hebrew University. So we welcome you, Hamital.
Thank you, Claire, for this thoughtful and detailed introductions. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I see that among the participants, some dear and beloved mentors of mine. I think the one thing that was not included in the short bio that you read was that I'm a professional feminist, meaning that I have the privilege to that feminism is both my activism, but also a big part of my professional work. And I'm a member of a group called Mothers Against Violence. We started out, the group was formed about 3.5 years ago during mass anti-government demonstrations in Israel. And we started wearing yellow vests and just going out during the demonstrations with the purpose of protecting the demonstrators, especially the young men and women, from police violence. And when we couldn't stop it, we at least documented it. And we created spaces for ourselves to process the violence that we witnessed, and sometimes the violence that was directed at us when we tried to stop police violence. And then a new government was elected. It was called the Change Government. It wasn't my dream government, but it was slightly better than the one that preceded it. And then we came together and we said, we want to continue working together. And we decided to shift our focus and focus on the violence of the occupation. And within that, settlers' violence against Palestinian communities in the West Bank, and especially in the South Hebron Hills. And again, we went out, we met with members of these communities, especially with the women. And on our first visit to the village of Mufakra, after a pogrom perpetrated by settlers from a nearby settlement, we sat down with the women in a circle and we asked them what it is that we can do. And they said, please echo our story. Do not let it be forgotten or pushed aside. And of course, as a storyteller, I was so deeply moved and also committed to continue telling this story in many different ways from writing and being part of a research group focusing on how the occupation and settler violence specifically affects Palestinian women. And so when we decided to shift and focus on the violence of the occupation, we created a campaign that called to pull out the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, from the occupied territories. We called it in Hebrew, V'shavu banim legvulam. It is a sentence from our Jewish sources. It means, let the children come back and be within our borders. Of course, one of the issues is that Israel does not have clear borders. And then October 7th came. And I want to say something about our concept or our definition of motherhood, which I brought to the group, and I'm thrilled that they accepted it with so much love. Our definition of motherhood is that it is a political and moral position. It's not about whether you gave birth to children of your own or adopted children, or if you have children. Motherhood for us is a position of deep morality, of caring deeply for all children, Israeli children and the Palestinian children in Gaza and in the West Bank, and the world they're living in. So in that sense, everyone can be a member of our group. They can be men, they can be women, because it's not about what your family status is or whether you have it. It's about being committed, deeply committed to caring deeply. And so October 7th came, and I think that and I'm going to say a personal note for myself, as a Jewish Israeli feminist peace activist and anti-occupation activist, I was surrounded by people who felt very urgently that they must be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. They had to take a position. And I felt that what we must do is be pro-humanity and to care deeply about both our people. Because, and as Nurit said so beautifully, it's the people who are paying the price. So since October 7th, we're focusing on two things. One is daily vigils calling for the immediate release of all the hostages. And the second one is calling for a ceasefire. But it's not just a ceasefire. It's to put an end to war. And to understand that at the end of the day, we must work towards a sustainable political solution, one based on justice for both people. My dear friend, Vivian Silver, who was brutally killed on October 7th at her home in Kibbutz Be'eri, said, she used to say, my Zionism is conditional because my Palestinian friend in Gaza should have the same right that I do to a statehood and an identity, a sovereign identity. So I think that calling for a ceasefire is the immediate, but then we must work towards a sustainable solution for the conflict. And we must include Israeli and Palestinian women, feminist Israeli and Palestinian women, who will be part of track 1, track 2, and track 3 or negotiations. And I want to say, I know that these are horrible and difficult days. And when I see the images and footage and videos from Gaza, my heart breaks time and time again, and I'm enraged that this suffering inflicted upon civilians is being done in my name. And my heart breaks time and time again when I see the families of the 134 men and women and children still held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. And I'm infuriated by the violence perpetrated on innocent people because of the war. But I'm an optimist. I'm a radical hoper, I would say. And I have to say that as a group facilitator since October 7th, I've been facilitating different circles of Jews and Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Arabs. And I have this tremendous privilege of meeting true people of peace. And a dear friend and colleague of mine with whom I'm co-facilitating one of these groups said something really beautiful of what is a woman peace builder. She said a true woman peace builder remains faithful to her values of peace and nonviolence, regardless of the actions of the other side. And I adopted it, and I now quote her. Her name is Fakhira Khanoun, with full credit, because I think that one of the most important and critical things that we can do at this time is to hold on to our values, to our commitments that we had on October 6th. And I hear people who are saying they have sobered up. Well, I don't know, maybe something wrong with me, but I have not sobered up. I remain committed to the same values, and I think that they're more critical, more relevant than ever before. Thank you for your attention and for listening.
Thank you so much, Hamatal. Again, a really very moving presentation. Our next speaker is Neely Gross, and she is an educator. I got to connect with Neely through my friend Yael, whom I run with several times a week, and she told me about Neely, so she brought us together via email. Neely is the only Jewish teacher at a middle school for Israeli-Palestinian children in the city of Kalansawe. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, which is, okay, you can tell us when you speak. And this is Israeli-Palestinian city majority in central Israel. And before Neely taught there, she was working in many capacities, projects, and organizations with Israelis, Palestinians, Israeli-Palestinians, Jordanians, educating for peace. And some of you are aware that there are Israelis who go into the West Bank during olive harvest time to support the Palestinian farmers there who are often attacked by settlers. And Neely is one of these women who has gone during the harvest season to accompany Palestinian farmers and provide protection. So welcome, Neely.
Thank you very much. Do I have to make myself? Oh, I'm big. Hello, everybody. I can see we have some Palestinians here, and I really appreciate it. You must be very brave to participate. My name is Neely Gross, and I'm an Israeli. I was born in Jerusalem. I'm 67 years old. I'm the first generation to be born in Israel to my parents, and second generation to the Holocaust. My mother is from Baghdad, Iraq, a Jewish Arab, and my father was from Poland. I have 3 children. I was myself serving the IDF as a lieutenant. And my 3 children served the army. My son participated in 3 wars, 1 in Lebanon and 2 in Gaza. And I'm very happy to say that he's not participating now. Like Nurit said, I didn't sleep much during this time. And the first war I recall was the 67 war when I was 10 years old. or what we call the 6 Days War in Jerusalem, when we conquered the Sinai Desert, the Golan Heights, and the West Bank. This war was a turning point for the Israelis and the Palestinians. Since then, we've known other wars, but in 2000, I decided, because of various reasons, that I want to be a responsible citizen and act for peace. So I was, as Claire said, professionally involved in initiating and managing political, social, educational projects that dealt with meeting of different populations. The meeting of the populations is very important because we rarely meet each other. So it was like what maybe Nurit and Rutal refer to Arabs, but they're really Palestinians who live in Israel, or Israeli Palestinians, or Israeli Arabs. That's very hard to identify. The meetings were between Palestinians, Israelis, Israeli Palestinians and Jews, Israelis and Jordanians and Europeans. So I will talk about the Palestinians who are Israelis. There are three main populations of Palestinians: the Palestinians in the West Bank, the Palestinians who are Israelis, and the Palestinians in Gaza. The Palestinians who live in Israel and are Israelis by citizenship are those who remain within Israel's borders after the 48 war and received Israeli citizenship. The rest of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza are refugees from that war. The Jewish population and the Palestinian population, the Palestinian in Israel and the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank relate to each other by ties of blood, religion, and nationality, but were completely separated from each other until the 67 war, in which Israel conquered, of course, Gaza and the West Bank. The Palestinian residents of Israel moved between two main identities, very difficult identities. On one hand, Israel sees them as an enemy population because of their affinity to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians and other Arab nations see them as traitors because they are Israelis. Also, historically, already after the 48 war, what we call the Independence War, but they call it the Nakba. The Nakba means the disaster of the Palestinian people. The two populations, Jews and Palestinians, were separated inside Israel. Until 1966, the Arabs lived under military rule and the Jews under democratic rule. In such situation, the education systems was separated and the population themselves did not meet at all. Today, the Arabs and the Jewish population are involved together in all areas of the economy, in the academy, and in politics. And as Nurit said, some even serve the army, right? But the education systems are still separated, completely segregated. This fact does not allow children and youth from different cultures and religions to get to know each other. Since the Israeli Arab Muslims residents are also identified with the Palestinians who live in the occupied territory in Gaza, the separation is even more significant. In such a situation, stigmas, fears, and misconceptions about the different populations are created. Although in recent years, Arab teachers entered Jewish schools, because of lack of jobs in their society, Jewish teachers did not enter any Arab schools. So about 9 years ago, an initiative began to integrate Jewish teachers into the Arab society. I joined the initiative, and as mentioned, I've been teaching in Kalansawa. It's an Arab Muslim city in Israel. Except for few mixed cities in Israel, the Arabs live in different cities and the Jews in different cities. And nobody welcomes each other really in their own territory. So I started teaching in 2015, and since then we have experienced 2 wars and about 5 military operations in Lebanon and Gaza. Also, the Israeli government also enacted a fundamental law that discriminates against Arab citizens. This is called the nationality law. Of course, it brought up a lot of anger inside the Arab Palestinians in Israel. Even between the various wars, Israel's action in the West Bank and Gaza do not stop, and make it very difficult for the Palestinians on an ongoing basis. A matter that raises great sensitivity among their brothers in Israel. Also, the level of crime among Palestinians in Israel is very, very high due to years of neglect by the state of Israel. And they really suffer from it. As someone who is in daily interaction with them, I know their hardships well. Naturally, they emphasize with the plight of their fellow refugees. And on the other hand, they are supposed to show loyalty to the state of Israel, which does not take kindly to their identification, to say the least. This war, Palestinians in Israel are forbidden to publicly or privately sympathize with the plight of their fellow Palestinians. Those who post any post or say something publicly, immediately being arrested and questioned, even though they're Israeli, by the way. Well, it happens to Jews as well, but not as much. Even somebody asked me, oh, how do you have the courage to talk like this in this meeting, And of course, I'm not afraid at all. I don't think I should be, but as a teacher in the educational system of Israel, if somebody will hear me talking, I might be hurt, okay? But I don't care. So as an only Jewish woman in the school or the entire city, even in the entire city, there are no Jews. So I'm the only one working there. I might represent for them the Jewish government that harasses them and their brothers on a regular basis. In any bad situation, war, terrorist attacks, military operations, and others, I never avoided coming to work. The students meet me as a Jewish woman on a daily basis, who is loyal to them, loves them, and respects them. For them, this rare meeting with me breaks stigmas, breaks negative opinions and fears, and allows them and the team, my colleagues, to see that there are Israeli Jews who think differently, who sees them as full partners and who empathize with the pain of the Palestinian brothers and sisters. Every day at school, I'm being asked, do you like Palestinians? Do you like Arabs? Are you pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel? And I always tell them, I don't like Arabs or Jews. I like people, but good people. And I'm not Palestine or not pro-Israel. I'm pro both. We can live together. We have to share this land together. Saying, you know, Palestine from river to the sea or Israel from river to the sea is not possible. We have to share this place and live normally and happily together. That's what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neely. Thank you. And at this point, I want to give Nurit an opportunity to bring in a video that from one of the members of Women Wage Peace. And I also want to acknowledge Dr. Rachel Ben-Dor, who was the founder of the For Mothers, a women's group that was significant in concluding the war in Lebanon. So these are a historical example of the influence. I know that Nurit talked about the rise of the feminine, but that influence on that war. But Nurit, I hope Nicole can pull that up, or you can pull that up. You're all set for it. And then we'll do part 2.
That's great. Thank you. So when I first agreed to do this talk, I noticed that Women Wage Peace was one of the organizations, and then I understand that whoever it was couldn't make it. So I want to acknowledge Vivian Silver, and Hamutal actually mentioned her, and Hamutal knows her personally too. So I want to open the floor to Hamutal also to say a word. Vivian Silver was 74 years old, and she had been pursuing peace I mean, she was a peace activist. She was a peacemaker her entire life. She co-founded Women Wage Peace, which lobbies for a diplomatic resolution to the conflict, which brought women, both Israeli and Palestinian women together. She served on the board of directors of B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization. And she also volunteered for the organization called Road to Recovery, which provides transportation for sick Palestinians from Gaza to Israel for medical treatment. So she was a constant. She was tireless in her activism. And she was a personal friend of my family. She was just, she was a light in these dark times. She was born in Canada. What else can I say about her? And I think some of you may have already heard, but she was actually murdered in the October 7th atrocities. And we are heartbroken over this. I mean, at first she was thought to be taken hostage, but then they did discover her remains in the house where she lived in Kibbutz Be'eri, which is on the border with Gaza. There's so much to say about her. I want to give her the floor here too, which is why I found a 3-minute video where she speaks about her work. But I will invite Hamutal. Would you like to, I know you said you also knew her personally. Would you like to say a word or two about her and why I think it's important to bring her voice, or why? I think so. I hope you do too, to bring her voice to this forum.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for that, Nurit. I think Vivian was when she was alive and still is an inspiration for so many of us in her relentless commitment to peace and to humanity, and with a great sense of humor and tremendous amounts of compassion. I'm keeping her WhatsApp account, and I keep going back to the last message I received from her on October 7th. And thank you so much, Nurit, for bringing her voice to this meeting.
Thank you, Hamutal. Thank you for joining me in this. This is a picture of her that I'm sharing on the screen. At first, we thought she was taken hostage. And like I said, it chokes me up actually to talk about her last moments. I know my sister was in a WhatsApp group with her too and received one of the last WhatsApp messages she sent, a text message she sent where she was saying she was hiding when she was actually in her secure room, which turned out not to be very secure, on the last day, she had a conversation with a radio host who called her for an interview, and I don't know if you could see it on the screen, but she ran to her safe room. She called her son, Yonatan. She told him that there were rockets outside, and then she stopped responding. She was giving a radio interview on Galei Tzahal, which is the army radio, to a host she had frequently sparred with about her activism. He had poo-pooed her belief in peace. And she took the call from her safe room, and he said, "We have Vivian Silver on the line." It was difficult to make out her words over the rocket sirens, but she seemed to be prodding the host about the importance of a deal between Israelis and Palestinians, even as she was under attack. He said, the radio announcer said, "Oh, but one side is insane. How can we possibly make peace with them?" And she, as usual, said, she always believed in peace. She always believed that there's only one way of getting to security and a place of safety for everybody. And she said, "We can talk more about this if I survive," she said at the end. Sadly, she did not survive, but I would love to play a little that clip if you have it, Nicole. Is it something we have?
Yes, just give me a moment.
Great, no problem.
Excuse me.
So what is Women Wage Peace? We're a proactive, pragmatic, grassroots movement.
There's no sound.
There's no sound. We heard her before, and now we don't.
We must put an end to this madness.
Is that better?
Today, we number over 40,000 diverse Israelis, Jewish and Arab, religious and secular, from across the political spectrum.
My video is just buffering. Pardon the pause there.
Our premise is that peace and security are not issues owned solely by the left, and that Zionism is not an ideology solely owned by the right. We believe you can be pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, in other words, pro-peace. We're a one-issue movement with one goal, and that's to reach an honorable and bilaterally acceptable political agreement to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with the full participation of women in all aspects of negotiation. We're actually looking to change the decades-old paradigm that we have been taught in Israel, that war is the only way to bring peace, to a new paradigm which claims that only a diplomatic agreement can achieve security for the people in our region. What are our strategies? First, to use careful, inclusive language to enable us to grow our movement with women from a broad political spectrum and forge local, regional, and international partnerships. To focus on the existential necessity to reach a political agreement rather than advocating for any one specific peace plan. And to those who say we're avoiding the issue, we say library shelves around the world are lined with numerous peace plans that have been formulated over the past several decades, costing millions of dollars. There's the Clinton Initiative and the Nusseibeh Ayalon Plan and the Quartet Initiative and the Geneva Initiative. This two-state solution, the binational state solution, one homeland, two-state solution, federation, confederation. The list goes on, but has sadly not produced the much hoped for results. What is clear is that the Palestinian and Israeli leadership has to negotiate directly in good faith and come up with a political agreement that is acceptable to both sides. Women Wage Peace will support whatever agreement is formulated by the two sides. So we work intensively with our sister Palestinian movement, Women of the Sun, showcasing that there is, in fact, a partner for peace. Together, we're harnessing public, government, and worldwide support for our joint Mother's Call for Peace, which you can see in the chat, hopefully, and which you'll receive by mail. We invest major resource in professional and planned media exposure to ensure we maintain a high public profile to keep the pressure on.
We may have lost Vivian Silver, but we have not lost her voice. And those of us
Education is an investment.
My apologies.
Get your
we are
free
still carrying her torch. Thank you.
Thank you, Nurit. And I just want to take a moment before we get into the Q&A to acknowledge again Dr. Rachel Bandor, who was so helpful in helping to make some of the connections for this afternoon's program. And so Dr. Rachel Bandor, did you want to say a word or two? We have to unfortunately keep it brief because we want to give time for questions.
The only thing I want to say that I'm so proud to be an Israeli. It's so difficult to be at this point, to be part of this group, amazing women that works in Israel. And I know that they will do it. They will finish this atrocity and bring life back to the South and to our region. And there is no alternative. Nobody else would do it. So I'm so proud to be part of it, and I'm trying to support and do whatever I can in Israel and around the world to make it happen.
Thank you. Now we get to part two, which is the questions from the audience. But before we begin, we just have a short exercise, a little gesture that Abby came up with that she'll guide us on.
Hi, everyone. We just thought after you've heard these women speak with such inspiring messages about peace and what unites women and sort of motherhood, if you might think of a word of appreciation for what you've heard, a word of appreciation for these women, for their message, for what they've said, would you like to express that in the chat box? And this is for everyone to type in the same time.
So we'll move to our Q&A and just a little bit of framing before we begin. You know, one of the many tragedies of war is that it typically takes a small number of people to get a war going, decision makers, orders from a general. It always amazes me how few people are needed to start a war and how many are needed to end it. It requires massive mobilization among people. And it is stopping the war in Gaza that we're focusing on this afternoon, how to do it with the capacities, the perspectives that we have. A war that has brought deep loss to the Israeli community, a war that many of us see as a genocide unfolding in Gaza. So a war that is crushing children, as Nurit pointed out, I often think I'm seeing a house on fire, and I have in my head the phrase, "Oh God, they are burning the house. Where is the water?" So we want to think this afternoon, where is the water? Where are the buckets? What do we have to stop this war? There are many actions in the future that are necessary to bring a just and sustainable peace, and many of us here are working on that. But I would ask if you could think practically in this time that we have together. What do we need? What are the challenges that we face? And if you could use the icon to raise your hand, we'll do our best to keep track. We want this to be a kind of workshop sharing. And when I think about the two societies, our own, and this will be the opening question for any of the panelists, we are working under circumstances of political leaders that in the US that are not listening to the American public. Over 60% have wanted a ceasefire. So this is a deep challenge, and it seems for you, it must be similar in Israel. What are some of the tactics that you're using, strategies to push that rock? That's question number one. Any Nurit or Hamital, or Neely, you're welcome to respond.
So maybe I will start by saying many of you wrote patience as your word of appreciation, courage, but also patience. So I'm 61 and I've been a peace activist, which means for the last 44 years. So this means I'm in the streets demonstrating for peace, anti-occupation for over more than 4 decades. And I think that I remain active and I remain hopeful. I love that someone wrote radical hope in the chat because of 3 things. One is, as I said, I'm an optimist. The second one is I'm a nudnik, which means I never give up. I never give up. And the third one is that I persist. And I think that one of the perhaps biggest enemies to any social and political transformation is despair and the lack of belief in our capacity to make a difference. And so I think that, to go back to the point about courage, I think that even when things seem to be so bleak and that the political leaders are simply not listening, this is exactly the time to make our voices heard. Because if these voices are not heard, then people are saying, oh, nobody's talking about it. And so it's, breaking the silence time and time and time again, and speaking out and constantly making our voices heard in any way possible, whether it's through vigils and demonstrations and op-eds and articles, etc. And reaching out to politicians, because the voices must always be there. Because I believe that gradually more people will be open to hearing them and then to joining them and voicing them themselves.
May I speak?
Yes, please, Neely, go ahead.
I want to say that I'm considered in Israel a radical left woman. I don't like these definitions so much because I don't know, I consider myself just a human who care about other humans, not exactly left or right, but I'm always in a minority. After the 7th of October, it almost cost me relationships with friends and family when I said my opinions. I couldn't even say that I care about the Palestinians in Gaza. Once I said that, everybody used to shout at me and be angry at me. Even my brother, even my friends, who went to all the to protest, against the government before the war, suddenly saw me as a strange person. Because I always remember there was a story about a man who protested in front of the White House for years, and somebody asked him, does it have any meaning? Do you change anything? And he said, well, maybe I don't change anything. I just make sure that the world doesn't change me. And and Hamutal talks about people sobering up, like say, oh, we thought there can be peace, we can make peace with the Palestinians, with the Arabs, but now we understand there is no hope, And I always say, those who sober up, they don't understand what they're talking about. I want to say that on media, on the television, the Israeli television shows nothing, really hardly anything about what's going on in Gaza. The Israeli citizens don't really see anything unless they're really searching for it. So there is so much ignorance and so much lack of information about it that whenever I try to tell them, look what's going on. There are children, there are women, there are just innocent people. And I want to show them, videos because I really follow, what's going on. But they don't even want to see it. So there's like a black veil, between us and Gaza, and also in the West Bank, because right now, even though there is a war in Gaza, the settlers, the Jewish settlers, supported by the army, are just committing crimes, But nobody's really seeing that much because everybody's seeing Gaza. But what's going on in the West Bank is horrible. And nobody cares. Nobody knows about it. The news doesn't show it. Nobody talks about it. The newspapers doesn't write about it. So people in Israel don't really understand what we're doing and what the situation is. That's what I want to say.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Julie.
I'd
I
like
think
to.
so. Can we get people to do you know how to raise your hand in Zoom? Because that way we can keep track of the list of people waiting. So at the bottom of if you move your mouse to the bottom, there's a button that says reactions. And if you click on the reactions and then click on raise hand, and that will allow us to keep track of people waiting in line. Thank you. So Nana, would you like to say something? Nurit, we'll let you go after Nana.
Good afternoon or good evening, for you guys. Thank you so much for holding this. I found, a common thread between all the talkers, that there is hope for peace, there's hope for, for justice. But to be honest with you, the governments on both sides, whether it's the Israeli government or, our own government here in the United States, don't seem to be anywhere close to this. I know Claire alluded to this, but amongst the Israeli populace, what percentage of people feel the way that our talkers or the speakers here today feel? Because the last we heard, it was the broader percentage or the broader majority of the Israeli, population is all for supporting the current government. which obviously is not a peace government.
Thank you. Nurit, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Nana, for that question. You are asking the right question. I want to, I'm going to circle back to what both Nili and Hamutal said, and I'll add to it from what you're asking here. Yes, I have hope also. I believe in the end, there has to be peace in the end. And I also believe that, like Nili said, most of Israeli society seems to be deep in some kind of dreamlike state. I don't know what to call it. Brainwashed is obviously the word a lot of people use. They don't see it, and it's disturbing, and it does make those of us, I mean, we find each other. So here, we feel less alone, but there are times, we sit at your family dinner table and you feel very alone. You feel very like, wow, that no one agrees anymore. It's like that people think you're crazy for believing that, there's someone to talk to on the other side, that there's a possibility of peace, that we must make it. Yeah, I think you're right, Nana. I think right now we are in a dark place. I don't think that I do take a little hope from the fact that the majority of Israelis today are opposing this government, this criminal government, I will say. So as much as, yes, they seem to be in some confused place about supporting the war, but they are also very, very angry at this government. And I want to reflect on something that was also said. It does seem like we are all being held hostage by a very small group of men. I have to say it, although there are women who support them, and I can't fathom exactly how they do that, but somehow they manage to justify it. There's always some. It's all around the world like this. I mean, this isn't just in the Middle East conflict, although ours is a particularly thorny tangle. Ukraine, Russia is another one, of course, and it's also being held hostage by, hey, there we can look at, one man and his supporters. It's the same in the Middle East. I see Netanyahu, and I'm sorry, I will say this too, I see the Hamas as the same. I mean, they are terrorists against the people. And we have to trust that they're going to pass from the world, that their time is done already or close to it. There is a shakiness to their hold on, their grip on power, that if you look carefully, you see it. But that grip on power includes this sort of like brainwashed state of Israeli society. It's more than what Neely was saying, is that Israelis don't see what's going on in the West Bank and don't see what's going on in Gaza. They don't see what's going on among Arabs in Israel either. I mean, if you ask the average Israeli, how do you get from one place to another, they'll talk about the big Jewish cities. They won't even see the Arab cities that could be also very large and thriving. Right next door. We somehow managed to create this situation where, I don't know, we've erased half the population, and it's half the population. We've got 7 million Palestinians and we've got 7 million Jews, Israeli Jews in the same space. I mean, however you want to look at it, and no one's going anywhere. We're all staying. So we have to work this out. There's no other option, really. We have to work this out. So do we have to hang in there until these few handful of really disturbed people lose their grip on power? Maybe we have to keep saying it. We have to believe that there can be a cultural shift. And I believe people are good at heart. I believe that people are good at heart, that they can be brainwashed. They can be, I don't know, distracted by so many other things, by their own lives. Maybe they don't want to see the harsh things. It's too painful. You can talk about the trauma of my people and how we are now inflicting that trauma on another group. I mean, hurt people, as the well-known saying goes. All those things are true. All those things are true. How do we get past it? Well, yeah, we keep doing this. We keep doing this. We keep doing it until there's change. That's what I have to say about that.
Nana, where are you from originally, if I may ask? Jerusalem? I can't hear.
You're still on mute. You're on mute.
You're muted.
You're muted.
So I'm actually originally from Egypt. So,
Oh, you're Egyptian.
but I grew up in the United States. My dad was martyred in the 1967 war. I was only 2, so I don't really even remember him. So this has been going on for a long time. And honestly, I feel like, we've tried wars and clearly they haven't solved anything. So why can't we try to be decent to each other? Maybe that will take away the Hamas and the Hamas ideas and all the, radical ideas that are out there. I don't understand. It seems like such a, a common sense,
Yes.
idea. Why don't we try it?
I think many of us share your view. I see that Orit, am I saying your name correctly? Has her hand up. Please, you have a question.
Hi. It's Orit, but it's fine. It's okay. No, I don't have a question. I just want to say something about what Nana said. I don't have the percentage. I think at the beginning, after the 7th of October, people felt it was mandatory to go, into Gaza. I do think there's a change in the government is we're being held being held hostage by Netanyahu and his reason for staying in the war, keeping keeping his place. But I just want to, so I don't have the numbers, but I do think it is changing. I feel like a lot of people are starting to, are feeling that this war is not going in. That's it, it's finished. And the thing I wanted to say is my son, who's been 3 times in Gaza with different, we was with the different combat groups, said that every time he went in, every time for like 13 days, they all want a hostage agreement now. Now they're saying it, they're sitting there, they're stuck, they don't want to be there. So, and he heard this from, it was from the parachuters to the Nahal, whatever. They all are praying, and funny enough, some of them said, oh, maybe we can get hurt and get out of here. They're praying. First of all, the reason they're there was they thought they could get the hostages out. It's obviously not working. And all they want is an agreement so they can come out and finish this thing. So this is from, I'm saying this because I know a live from from Gaza. And I've seen pictures because he's a camera combat. So he takes pictures. So it's terrible. And I think they feel it's terrible too. And I've heard a lot of stories, but he says it doesn't matter if they're right, like people who come from the right or left, they all want out. So, I mean, most of them, I'm talking like 90%. So that's the soldiers. I just wanted to say that because it's important for me, to comment about what you said. So just, I think whoever's there is feeling, that's it. We've had it. We can't take this anymore. So yeah, that was important for me to say.
Yes, while we're waiting for questions, I want to offer some historical examples of the influence of women on other conflicts, not this one. In Liberia, there was a terrible civil war, and I think as women, we're very aware that the dynamic of war making is very challenging to reverse because you have men with guns, and that's a high power capacity and extremely volatile. And it's complicated because women have sons on both sides who are those people with guns. And then, children are getting killed, community life is getting thoroughly disruptive, and it becomes intolerable. So in Liberia, they were trying to penetrate this dynamic by speaking to women on the radio. So a radio journalist began to kind of break the malaise or defeat or despair through radio, her radio programs. And this facilitated a kind of covert organizing among a lot of the women, to the point that when the militants and the government were being pushed to negotiate, they were doing so in Sierra Leone, and they could not come to an agreement. And the women literally blocked the door. They would not let the men out of the room. There weren't women at the table making the peace. And one of the leaders, female peace leaders, ripped her shirt and bore her, breast, which in Liberian culture is what you do in a state of great distress. And they did not let the men out until they came up with something that would resulted in a cessation of hostilities. Over in Northern Ireland, where similar to Israel-Palestine war, genocide, where the armed men are often staying in households, or, they're not off separate from the community. After a car fight resulted in the death of Mairead Maguire's sister's 2 children. She is a Catholic woman, and I think the death of another. They were walking on the sidewalk with a child in a pram. This initiated a turning point among women in both communities, because daily life was so disrupted from the violence that they began to go door to door and just talk to the women. And so that strategy was kind of petitions, 1-to-1 in both communities. It was not easy. It's not easy, but that they used this mutual I've had it energy to communicate that things could not go on that way. So these are just, I'm offering these historical examples. Are there other questions from our listeners?
I would like to say something. Israel is a very military society. All the politicians were generals in the army. And it's very hard because it's a compulsory to go to the army here. We cannot resist. Like if somebody resists to go to the army, he goes to jail. Because of that, like everybody has, but it's not really like that, because the very Orthodox Jews in Israel don't have to go to the army. And also the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs, don't have to go to the army because they are Palestinians. So the Druze go to the army and the Bedouins go to the army, the Jews go to the army. That means about 50% of the young people have to go to the army, while others don't serve the army. But it's a very militaristic society. And now those who even lead the protests against the government are called brothers in arms. Yeah. And I don't understand why everybody who protests, they always mention their military service, what they did in the army, what they didn't do in the army. I mean, it's all about the army here, If you didn't go to the army, then you were nothing. You don't have even the right to talk. So it's very difficult to change we don't have a professional army. And that changes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Neely and Claire. Thank you so much for providing this historical framework. By the way, there is a series of documentary films that tell the story, Claire, that you just shared by Fork Film. It's a series called Women, War and Peace. There's one about Liberia, one about Northern Ireland and other conflict areas, which I think it's highly recommended. And I agree with Neely that I think what we're lacking, profoundly lacking, is a civil society. And I think that the fact that people are using their military background is for 2 things, and we need to change both. One is to show that they understand, and therefore they can speak about the conflict because they have a military background. And therefore, if you're a woman and you were not in active combat duty, then you can't speak about it, which is, of course, bubkis. Yes, it's nonsense, because you don't have to understand war, you have to understand peace. So that's one thing. But the other thing, which is even more disconcerting, is that you have to prove your allegiance before you can voice your criticism or offer a critical perspective. And this radical right-wing madness did not begin post-October 7th. It started at least 2 decades beforehand. I was labeled a traitor because I was photographed with my friends from Mothers Against Violence visiting a Palestinian village in the South Hebron Hill. And I received phone calls at 1 a.m. in the morning calling me a traitor. And so this practice of political persecution of people who are not tagging the party line or who are making critical voices heard is not something new, and it didn't start on October 7th. So that's why I think it is so important to persist and to insist and to be a nudnik, as I said. And I see Hannah Safran has her hand up.
So Hannah, why don't you ask your question, and then we have a question in the chat. Claire, I think we're ending at 3:30, is that right?
Yes, although that was my assumption, but if people want to stay on longer, I can certainly keep the room open until we were not wanting to impose on our Israeli visitors, recognizing that for you all, it's the night is passing, but I can keep the room open until 4 if for those who wish to stay, but formally we would close at 3:30. And panelists, please let us know your needs. But next for Hannah's question.
Let's go to Hannah, and then we'll do the one in the chat. Go ahead, Hannah. Unmute, can you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is such an amazing conversation, which we need every day and every evening, because we need to listen to each other and to support each other. I think there are two things from you in the United States. Write to your Congress people, to the president every day. Get up in the morning, spend 5 minutes on writing to anyone of importance, or a letter to the New York Times, or God knows what. I think it really is the role of the United States that allows Israel to do this horrific acts of violence. And secondly, I think it's very important that each one of us all there and here create circles of both Palestinian, Muslims, Arabs, Christian Arabs, doesn't matter. Get to know people that we've never talked to, create alliances, because there's only one hope here, to be together and to fight the extreme right wing within Israel and the Hamas outside Israel. It's not us or them. It's together against evil powers, which are really here to destroy us all. And it really is frightening. So we really need your support and your love and care, and thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. So let's just go to the question in the chat. What do you want us to, I imagine this is to the speakers. What do you want us to tell our family and friends having listened to this panel? Oh, Yifa answered.
I would actually love to. So Ifa and Michal Brody-Bereket are both here from the Mother's Cry group. And I would love to open the floor to them a little bit if they're willing to. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if they would like to say something in response, their voices are so clear and coherent and eloquent that I would love to invite them to take my place right now.
I'd be happy for Michal to talk, if that's fine with you, Michal.
Oh, Michal, hold on a minute. Just a second, Michal. There you go.
And there's Merav too here.
Good
Also with
evening,
us.
good evening or good afternoon. Actually, maybe you can hear my son's music. He's playing the guitar now here beside me, my soldier son. He's out of Gaza at last. He's now home and he doesn't really know much about my activity. So it's a little awkward to talk about it right now. I was the founder, I am the founder of the Mother's Cry. I'm very glad, I was very glad to hear what Nurit said. I appreciate your words, Nurit. And you represented so well Mother's Cry. Thank you. And now I will let Ifa talk.
Well, I'm not the person who talks a lot, and you cannot even see me because I can't at the moment. So I did write down what I like an answer to someone who asked about the way we would like you to support. That's one of the ways to support, one or two. Just to spread the word, to let people know this is happening. This is happening in Israel, and just as many of you of the speakers spoke, women are changing the reality. It's our role. It's our time, and even if it takes how long it takes, that's what we have to do. And really, it's not easy, and it's like every day you gotta do it again and again, and you it's yeah, just to get up, to get yourself up and awake and be there. We have this community of mothers to soldiers, Mothers Cry, and it's I guess I can say it's getting bigger, it's growing, and that's the thing that's what that's important, to see it's growing, and wherever we can, just to spread the word. That's what we do.
I would like to answer the question about what you should say to your families or friends. We usually put all the Israelis in one, like all Israelis are bad, or all Palestinians are terrorists, or I just want people to know that we're not all the same. Even though my government decides to go to war and does what they want to do, it doesn't mean that us, the citizens, or some of us, or maybe not the majority, but many of us, people should know that we are not all the same. We have a lot of different people here thinking differently, and the Palestinians are not all terrorists, or there are people of peace, and many people of peace live in everywhere around us. I follow a lot of Palestinian pages on Instagram or Facebook, and sometimes I have conversations, like I'm writing. I have conversations with Palestinians who hate me very much, I must say, and I just want them to know, that I'm that they cannot see all of us as one piece, that it's very, very complicated. The situation is complicated. Everything is complicated, and it's very nice to talk to them. By the way, they are very. It's very nice for them to know me. You know, they're usually very surprised. They're very surprised that I'm in the group. I'm following them, and this communication is very important. So just let everybody know that, you know, it's not just now there are women working for peace. All along the history of Israel, many organizations, many mothers, many women, many men work for peace all the time, not very successfully, but we're always doing it. You know, I'm 67, like Hamutal said she's 61. Yeah, you don't look 61, by the way.
Neither do you.
I must say. And like all our lives are we're going through this, you know, our children are going to war, we were in the war, you know, we always used to say, oh, my grandchildren will never fight, you know, but it's not like this. It's going on for a few generations already. And people say, do you know how the children in Gaza will revenge us one day? And it's very sad for me, you know, that we're creating generations of children that will be, you know, will hate us so much that will, you know, they want, I don't know how it will happen, but we just create generations of hating people, which is really sad.
So I am mindful that it's 3:36. Do our speakers have the time to stay until 4? I don't want to presume. I know for those who want to stay, Abby needs to leave us, but I wanted to check before we continue. So do you
I
have?
too, no, I actually have an appointment coming up, and so I'm gonna have to also take my departure from
Okay.
you reluctantly, but unfortunately. So I am so grateful for all of you for having me and for listening and for your questions, and just, you know, knowing that there are women throughout the world who are supportive of our efforts is so important. So I really appreciate that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Nurit. We really are grateful for your time, and I'll be in touch when we provide the recording. We want to give links to the different groups that were identified here, so that people can stay connected and continue. So for those who can stay on, I'll certainly keep the room open for a little bit longer. Neely and Hamutal, do you need to leave?
No, I don't.
Okay. So we have Dr. Rachel Bendor's hand is up.
I will just want to conclude this meeting by saying that, Claire, to your group, you heard about the need of support, especially because traveling in the academia and other institutions in the United States, it's very difficult being an Israeli, a peace activist. Although many people know me, it's still hard to talk and to gain people, to make people listen to you. So meeting with you, with your group, and I know that you have a newsletter among the Catholic Church, right? So we would like very much if you can share this recording to show these amazing Israeli women that are fighting for peace. This, because according to surveys that I checked, yes, the majority of Israel, and we are talking about 60% now at least, and see the millions on the streets every week, almost every day. So there are many people like us in Israel, and we need your support. I don't want to walk around and being banned from places and I would like to be ask you to join us, because it's hard to do it ourselves. We have a very stubborn government, very corrupt. Also on the other side, we need all the support. So we are not, as other women mentioned, it's not about pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli, it's about pro-life and peace. And we need to join forces. So I would like to ask you, Claire, and your group to see how we can promote it in the United States and other places. Do we want to have more webinars like that? Do you want to write it among the Catholic Church or priest, and see if we can have a discussion over there? And also, I guess these people would need not only emotional and mental support, also some physical support. So if they can raise some money for this group, because at this point, everybody's paying from their pocket. We did it as well. We are not asking for it, but we have a big goal and mission here to achieve together, because it's affect everyone. And this is also for the people in Gaza that cannot do as much as we can, unfortunately. So we can give them our voice as well. So the question I would like to raise, where do you see us going from here, and what your support can do well? Yeah.
Well, I love your thinking, Rachel. You are clearly a tactician and an organizer, and every
I'm very pragmatic, yeah.
Yes, I know. And so I do want to share with our Israeli visitors a little bit on what Mass Peace Action and the center is kind of a small alliance with Mass Peace Action. And Nana has worked very, very hard on this from the organizing on behalf of members of the Worcester Islamic Society, but we are having meetings with our lawmakers. And one thought is it would be maybe interesting to try to get Senator Warren's, we have managed to get a meeting with her aides, but not with her, but to have her aides meet with some of these voices from Israel. I don't know, Nana, what you think, but that might be important thing, and even to try to think about that. We're currently facing a primary in our state, so the presumed candidate for the Democrats is Biden. There's displeasure with how he's just not stopped this war. And, as Hannah said, the US needs to pressure for that. So there is a campaign for a protest vote in the primary. It won't take Biden off the ballot. He's going to win the primary, but people are voting no preference to show that they don't like that they want a ceasefire. So it's kind of a ceasefire vote. We can't write ceasefire on our ballot, but we're trying to use that political tool. And there is a lot of organizing of rallies. Several of us just came from a big one in Cambridge yesterday. I don't think, for the Americans who are still in our Zoom room, the Israelis are phenomenal in their stamina for demonstrations, and with standing quite abusive, situations when they do their marches and standouts for peace. I've seen that myself, and with gratitude, appreciate that you have to absorb quite a bit of violence, either from the police or from those who disagree with your perspective. So that is another tactic. I don't know if this group has had communication with Jewish Voices for Peace, or if not now, but they are very creative in their strategies for pushing for a ceasefire. So those are just some, if others that are still in the Zoom room have ideas that
What about religious organizations? If we want to raise some voices and engage with echoing what's happening in Israel among the peace camp, so this can give us a very broad group of talk with, and these people care about this region.
Yeah.
So they're very motivated. So we can maybe engage with them. I'm asking you, since I know as a correspondent, you have a newsletter.
Yes, yes. I do think that's something individually I could possibly do, is to do an article, because I do I
Right.
know speaking as a Catholic, a recent poll said 70% of Catholics support a ceasefire, but the leadership of that tradition has been terribly mute. And I think it's connected with being worried that if they say critical things that it will be anti-Semitic, which is ridiculous, because you're criticizing policy, not a community. You're criticizing war making, but this is an obstacle for that voice. But yes, I think writing a story is definitely possible. And I'm also trying to think of, another very important link is Code Pink. Code Pink is the feminist organization. Maybe some of you are familiar in Israel, but they have been absolutely tireless on opposition to this war. And they argue, they're anti-militarists, so they very much do it from the anti-feminist critique of militarism. And I think it would be good for them to host a webinar with your voices, because they have quite a large audience.
Sure.
Yeah, and I have a suggestion in the chat box. Patricia is saying that there's the tool of war tax resistance. You can redirect a portion of your tax dollars. This is for the Americans who are engaged in war tax resistance, to peace organizations that are working toward a ceasefire. And the National War Tax Resistance Coordinating Committee here in the US is seeing a large swell in interest in doing that. So shifting what you would pay for federal taxes to a peace organization.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll try to include a link to that in our recording. So
Yeah.
Before we conclude, Nana, I think it was you who wrote, "What do you say to the mother in Gaza who has lost everything?" So thank you for this. In honesty, one of the things that I feel since October 7th is that I have to give birth to new words, because the old ones are failing me. So I don't know what I would have said except cry in the face of the devastation. But you mentioned, Anna, earlier that you lost your father in the 67 war. And I just wanted to mention a group called the Bereaved Family Circle. It's a forum of Israeli and Palestinian families, of people who have lost their loved ones to the conflict. And I had the great privilege of facilitating several programs with them. And every time I'm in the room with them, whether it's a Zoom room or an actual room, I am so filled with inspiration, and I'm such deep appreciation for people who have lost the most precious thing, their loved ones, and still they find a way to make meaning of their loss by working for peace and reconciliation. I think it is one of the highest forms of being a human being. And so and in one of the last sessions that we've had during now these days, we spoke of moral imagination. And moral imagination, the beautiful definition, which I found in a beautiful book by an Israeli American literary critic. It's a whole book is about how literary texts can serve in the process towards peace and reconciliation. And so she defines moral imagination as this human capacity to release ourselves from hegemonic constructs and ways of thinking, and to release ourselves from paradigms of victimhood and revenge, and towards community resilience and peace and reconciliation. It's that simple and that difficult. I cannot judge anyone who lost their most loved ones and their heart is filled with sorrow and revenge. I mean, but I think that if we can offer love and compassion and hold in our hearts the grief of all people, then we have done maybe our small share of towards reconciliation and making our world a slightly more livable place, a place to live in.
I'm sorry, Nana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So we're getting lots of expressions of gratitude from participants, and I think unless there are any more questions, we might end.
Can I say something? I just want
Yes.
to say the second generation to the Holocaust, because you mentioned anti-Semitism. I have the obligation as a Jew that we cannot be racist. We cannot be, we cannot do to anyone harm as it was done to my family, father's family. This is totally wrong. We as Jews, we experience such horrible history that we're not allowed to do it to any other people. I don't understand how we lost our way totally in this place. And so this is like a vow for me, everybody is equal, and everybody has the right to self definition and to a place to live, and no matter what religion, nationality, or whatever race, we all human beings need the same thing. We need love. We need a future. Once we don't have a future, there is no sense. There is no. We don't have. We don't see why we should go on living, and we can do other things, bad things. We can commit suicide. We can kill others because we have no hope, and hope is gone. Here in Israel and Palestine, and that causes so much pain. And I want to say that Ramadan is coming, right? On the 12th or something. 11. And we also are going to experience not easy time here in Israel in Ramadan. And I really hope the army and the government will treat it very sensitive, with sensitive reactions. And I say Ramadan Kareem. You're muted. No.
Thank you for the sentiment. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I pray to God that, Ramadan can have some peace.
No.
So that's what we all pray for. Immediate peace, and especially for the children. This is the opening observation, to make all decisions focused on what they will need, and that's very critical. I think we will close. If I could just ask the name of the Moral Imagination book, if you could tell us that you referenced Hamutal, and then
Oh, okay. So there's actually a book by, I think his name is Robert Ledecker, called Moral Imagination.
okay.
He's a specialist on conflict resolution. But the book I was quoting from is called Disenthralling Ourselves, that piece from the famous Lincoln speech, and it's by Dr. Nita Shechet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we will do our best to get the recording out to all registrants. And thank you so, so very much to our panelists and friends from Israel. We really are grateful to know of you, to hear from you, and we wish you courage, persistence, and I hope that there can be continuing connection, because it does require an enormous amount of people to stop a war, and the ones who are the best to do it are the women.